Do you have a paranormal experience you'd like to share with our viewers? Record your story on your phone or write it down and email your video or written account to us at weirdworldstories@gmail.com. On October the 25th, 1974, Carl Higdon from Rawlins, Wyoming had a day off work and decided to go hunting and headed south towards McCarty Canyon. After walking less than a mile into the forest, he arrived at a clearing and came upon 5 elk a few hundred feet away. After pointing his rifle at the largest male, he pulled the trigger. But there was no sound, and the bullet left the barrel in slow motion and stopped about 50 feet in front of him. The bullet looked as if it had hit an invisible object before dropping into the snow. Strangely, the elk did not move, and the forest was eerily silent. After retrieving the bullet, Carl noticed a large transparent box on the ground that was about 5 feet high and 5 feet wide and about 7 feet long. The box looked to be made of glass and was empty. Carl then sensed something close by and quickly turned around. He found himself staring at a strange-looking humanoid that appeared to be floating upright. It was wearing a black suit similar to that of a scuba diver. He estimated that the being was around 6 foot 2 inches tall and about 180 pounds. It had no eyebrows, no ears, and small eyes. Its hair looked coarse and straw-coloured and stood straight out from his head like bristles on a broom, and was grouped into small bunches, spaced a half-inch apart. There were 2 rods coming from the top of its head that looked like antennae. It was wearing black shoes and a white belt with a 6-pointed star where the buckle would be. Below the buckle was a yellow symbol on a small apron. Its legs bowed outwards and had no hands, but there was a cone-shaped appendage sticking out of its right sleeve. Higdon assumed that the being was male, as it appeared to have some male characteristics. The being then moved towards him by floating above the snow, and when it got within a few feet of him, said, "Are you hungry?" But his lips did not move when it spoke. Carl then said yes, whereupon the being showed him a small envelope with 4 pills that floated towards him. The being told Carl to take one. Carl was extremely reluctant to take one, but promptly swallowed it as if it were being controlled. It then asked Carl if he wanted to go with it, and he replied, "I might as well," whereas the entity pointed its cone-shaped appendage at Carl. He suddenly found himself somewhere else. His next memory was being inside the transparent rectangular box, itself seemingly within a large transparent structure, both still resting in the forest, and he was sitting in a bucket seat with his arms and head restrained. He looked at a reflection on the glass above him and could see the 5 elk standing motionless in a cage. The being was also in the room with 2 more similar beings next to him. Carl said to it, "You've got my elk," and they just shrugged. The box then lifted off the ground, and he looked down to see his truck where it left it, but then the main being waved his hand and the truck just vanished. Carl's next memory was seeing a blue ball and a huge marble that was possibly the earth far below him. They told Carl that they were going home, which they claimed was 163,000 light miles away. They put a helmet on his head that had 6 wires sticking out in all directions and fastened a strap under his chin, and then everything went black before a very bright light came on, causing Carl's eyes to burn and water. Carl found himself standing in front of one of the transparent walls of the outermost structure, looking out into a giant, featureless space with no visible walls or ceiling. A light came from the top of a tower that looked similar to the Space Needle in Seattle, Washington, with lights that rotated around the top. Beneath the tower he could see several humans, adults and children, just talking amongst themselves. The main being then took Carl down a long walkway towards the tower, where he found himself floating like the beings. They led him to a door that lifted up, and he found himself inside a large room. Then a wall dropped down in front of him before lifting back up again into the ceiling. One of the beings walked up to him and said, "You're not what we want. We'll take you back." Carl was floated out of the room back into the bright light that burned his eyes again. They told him that the sun affected them in the same way when they were on Earth. Carl was then floated inside a craft we again encountered a being from the forest who identified itself as Odo-One. It said that it too was a hunter and had been coming to Earth for many years in search of fish and animals to make into food pills, and each pill would feed them for 4 days. It said that their ocean had turned yellow and all the fish had died. It then showed Carl a map of its planet, which was partially reproduced in the symbol of Otso's apron. It told him that the 9 planets of his solar system supplied the magnetic force for their power. It also examined Carl's rifle and told him that it would like to keep the primitive weapon but was not allowed to. It told Carl that their kind wore black to protect them from our sun. The craft then passed through a dark void where Carl observed them arriving over the forest. Carl found himself floating down to the ground below the craft. Before he landed, his foot slipped on a rock, causing him to fall and roll down the hill, hurting his shoulder. It was around 6:30 p.m. when Carl made his way back to his truck, but didn't recognize it as his own. He sat in the truck and heard voices on the CB radio, and after figuring out how to use it, managed to connect with someone, who turned out to be his boss, Roy Fleming. Fleming asked for his name and location, but in his confused state was unable to give either, saying, "I don't know, I'm so cold." He said he was in a truck with a funny stick in the middle. Carl's wife Marjorie returned from work around 4 p.m. with an uneasy feeling and a strong urge to contact her husband, before being alerted to Carl's distress call on the CB radio. A search party was organised, but due to the muddy roads, the team had great difficulty reaching the location where they suspected Carl's truck was. Marjorie and other people waited on a hill, and then one of them pointed to a large moving star that was changing colours. They watched for about 20 minutes as the light moved in an arc while flashing brightly, switching colour from red to green to white. The search party eventually found Carl around 11:40 p.m, and his truck was found roughly 3 miles from where he'd originally parked it. It was stuck in a mud hole with no tyre tracks leading to the site. Meanwhile, back on the hill, Marjorie saw a big, bright red-orange light rising on the eastern horizon, which they assumed was the sunrise, only to later see the real sunrise later that morning. When the search party returned, Marjorie noticed that Carl was in a confused state and had difficulty talking. He didn't even recognise her. She tried speaking to him, but he only looked through her. She tried to drape a coat over his shoulders, but he pulled back, crying, "Don't touch me." On the drive to the hospital, Carl asked Fleming why he wasn't dressed in black. "Doesn't the sun burn you?" When Carl arrived at the hospital, he repeatedly asked for his pills that float to you. When Marjorie asked him his name, he replied, "They keep calling me Carl. Who's Carl?" During his time at the hospital, Carl had trouble remembering everything and was given a pencil where he drew a picture of the being. Carl also drew a forked road and a sketch of the transparent craft. Carl Higdon was released from hospital on Monday, October the 28th. A Dr. Tonko found nothing of concern, but strangely, Carl previously had lung damage and kidney stones before his experience, but none after. Being healed from lung scarring and kidney stones was significant. Days after being rescued, he experienced headaches and a pain in his back, and was still mystified by what had happened, believing he was crazy. However, psychological and psychiatric tests revealed no signs of mental illness. One evening, Carl and his family went for a drive a few miles south of town. Carl seemed to know where he was going. Then in the sky above them, the family saw a bright green light, shaped like a large upside-down ice cream cone, which had a terrible odour. Carl then announced, "I'm late. I was to be here a few minutes earlier." A few nights later, Carl woke Marjorie and said, "I know it's weird. I'm in bed with you, yet I am out south of town. They're telling me look for a black box." When Carl drove to and from work, he was followed by lights in the sky that others also witnessed. Both Carl and Marjorie also felt that their phone was tapped. Carl claims that he still has telepathic communication with Orso, and once told him that Rawlins needed some rain, and the next day it rained 3 inches, then another 2 inches the following day, before telling Otso to stop, and the rain stopped. Carl told them that when shooting his rifle on the day of the incident, he had entered some type of force field that slowed his bullet down. The bullet was examined by investigators led by Dr. Walter Walker, a metallurgy consultant for the Aerial Phenomena Research Organisation, or APRO. He concluded that it hit something hard to turn it inside out. Sometime after, the bullet disappeared from the university's safe. Preston Dennett is the field investigator for the UFO network MUFON and has compiled over 300 cases involving spontaneous healing connected to a UFO or entity encounter, and concludes that the beings in these encounters are advanced extraterrestrials, neither malevolent nor evil, and heal people for reasons beyond just testing and experimentation. After being abducted, could it be inferred that Carl was meant to be taken away forever, but for some reason was rejected? It may be that some people who have gone missing under unusual circumstances were abducted in a similar manner and simply not returned. That missing person cases may be due to the same phenomena responsible for many UFO abduction experiences and other entity encounters. Whatever reason his abductors had for rejecting Carl, it may very well have saved his life.